connect with all stakeholders, right? Everybody needs to be involved in attendance. Teachers, students, families, community partners, like you said, the after school program, leaders. Everybody should be speaking the same language about attendance.
Hello everyone. Welcome to School After Hours podcast, where we talk about all things related to education and out of school time programming. I am your host, Jay Lee, and welcome to our 6th season. We've been doing this for quite a long time, and I'm so happy to be back with you all having these conversations. So one thing that I wanted us to dive into this year is student attendance. As things are changing in the world around us, not just in education, but out of school time programming, I know this is becoming a bigger issue in our environments, not just in our schools, but also in our programs. So I thought it would be helpful if we had a attendance specialist come on our show and gives us some tips and tricks about how we can tackle this issue successfully. Our guest for today, Johnetta Moore, is an attendance strategist and the founder of Moore Attendance Strategies. With 17 years of experience as a teacher and member of school leadership, she helps schools develop sustainable systems to address chronic absenteeism and promote student engagement. Johnetta specializes in providing educators with data-driven tools, family engagement strategies, and community collaboration that ensures that every school day counts. With all that being said, let's go ahead and jump into our conversation. Neto, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. So we're talking about all things related to attendance, right? And how that could affect not just the school environment, but also the after school environment as well, especially when you have those two entities working within the building. So one of the things that I wanted us to jump into is how does student attendance affect the school learning environment as well as school culture?
Okay. So I would say the lack of attendance weakens the school culture, right? Just like any business, you need customers. So for me, it's like the students are our customers, right? So they're deeply connected. I would say attendance can affect school culture. One, just thinking about the sense of belonging and community. High attendance build routines that reinforce the idea that school is a place where students are valued and expected to come and learn, right? But on the flip side, if you have a student who is chronically absent, that student is going to feel disconnected, and it impacts how welcoming the culture feels to that student. Teacher morale and instructional flow. If you are a teacher and you're constantly planning lessons and half of your students are missing out of your class, that disrupts the flow of instruction. It also affects the teacher morale because that teacher is going to be frustrated, disappointed, probably angry at the students and the parents, and rightfully so, because a lot of teachers, they pour their heart and soul into their lessons and decorating their classrooms and doing all the things. But if the students aren't there, then, that teacher is going to be overwhelmed and discouraged. Just students knowing the expectations. If you have a student who is chronically absent, they don't know the norms and expectations in a school. What am I supposed to do? I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And I would say lastly, they may lack like a sense of achievement and school pride because they're not there.
Right.
So I'm not going to get hype about my school if I have poor attendance and I'm not there when some of the things are happening because, they may be missing out on celebrations and parties and all of the fun things just because they're not at school.
Right, especially when you have partnering organizations that come to you not just during the school day, but after school and participating in after school programs. Like if you miss school, you're not able to participate in the other things that takes place after school, right? Because the first part wasn't taken care of.
Yeah.
So
and also, if you think about services too, kind of like our students, our special ed population, if they're not at school, they're missing some of those key services that they get. So it's really impeding their development because they may not be there to get the language classes, the speech therapy or the OT therapy. So it impedes their growth as a student.
Most definitely. And partnering in those situations for us, as far as our school time programming is concerned, like our connection for matching those services for after school, right? So I can't give you something that you wasn't particularly there for in the beginning. To now try to come at the end of the day, be like, hey, we could do. No, we can't do that.
Yeah.
No, you missed this. You missed this whole first part. This whole first part that needs to take
Right.
place first. And getting them
Absolutely.
back on track. So, in a sense, is important to communicate and see what the needs are and how we can help and work together. But in that vein, what are some of the basic challenges you see when it comes to student attendance?
What I experience as barriers to students coming to school, largely, like I said, it's transportation. You know, for example, some cities, some districts don't have school buses, like the yellow cheese buses. Some school districts don't provide that transportation to the general students at the schools, right? If it's a special ed student, then yes, they can get transportation. But if you're talking about just a student who ends up in that general category, they may have to ride the city bus to get to school. They may have to ride the subway or some form of transit to get to school. Sometimes we get calls from parents just to let us know, oh, well, the train is late, so my student is going to be late to school. You know, that's real, especially if you're in an urban city. Also, I was thinking about a principal that I talked to in a rural area, and the students there are expected to work and help. You know, their families may have land or farms or businesses that rely on a certain level of production. So now you have a student who can't come to school because they are helping with their family. And that is pretty hard to say no, you know, my family, school. It's like the priority at the time is financial and we have to take care of the family, right? Of course, you have students who have chronic illnesses that keep them from coming to school. A lot of parents may or may not know that there is assistance for that. There's a resource that you can use so that those absences won't stack up on their children. But also that information has to be given to the parent. You know, there may not be something that parents can automatically know is available. You have students who are diabetic, students who have lupus, asthma, all those things impact whether the student comes to school or not. So just looking at the barriers in different ways, because not only is it a barrier, but it affects schools in different areas in different ways.
Most definitely. And I didn't think about that when you talked about students with chronic absences because of illness, like how that can affect them at the same time. Like that wasn't even on my radar.
Yeah. Yeah, it largely got on my radar because my daughter is type 1 diabetic. She was diagnosed in elementary school, which caused her to miss a lot of days. And because I was an educator, I knew to ask about the paperwork that her doctor could fill out there so she could get a 504. But some people may not know that. And the schools should be in a position where they provide that information to parents. But the only way that you're going to provide that information is if you get to the root cause of why the student is not coming to school.
Are you a program provider or administrator struggling with planning day-to-day logistics for your after-school program? Or maybe you have a complete brain freeze when it comes to planning program activities. Or somewhere along the lines of when it's time to plan your activities, you have no idea where to start. What if I told you you don't have to figure those things out by yourself? Hi, my name is Janice Lee. I'm a former after-school program director and the founder of School After Hours Consulting, where we help youth program managers create impactful programs that ensure student success. With my 20 years of experience, I can definitely help you figure out all those things. Book a free 20-minute discovery call where we can get to know each other a little bit more, see if we can find simple solutions to your current challenges, and if you need it, we can see how we can work together. I look forward to hearing from you soon. Right. Exactly. Which you bring up a good point. When considering attendance, knowing some things to keep in mind, that being one of them, when it comes to student health and family health, how that affects the child as well. Which brings me to my next question. When administrators are building their attendance strategy, like what are some things that's important for them to keep in mind, and what techniques can they use to accomplish whatever those goals are for their attendance?
So I have a very simple framework that I use when I talk to administrators who are building attendance strategies. Three things. The acronym is ACE.
Mm-hmm.
So the first is analyze the data, right? You can analyze school data, but you actually need to drill down into like the specific grade levels, the specific subgroups. I'm talking like SPED students, your ELL students, some of the boys, some of the girls, like everything needs to be broken down to see exactly where you need to focus,
Mm-hmm.
because you can't focus on everything.
Right.
That's a common mistake. You want to focus on school-wide attendance strategy, which is good, but it may not be the whole school. It may just be a certain grade level
Mm-hmm.
or a certain subgroup or students missing a certain class.
Mm-hmm.
So you definitely have to analyze the data. Second, connect with all stakeholders, right? Everybody needs to be involved in attendance. Teachers, students, families, community partners, like you said, the after school program, leaders. Everybody should be speaking the same language about attendance. And a lot of times they only get that from whoever is over attendance, because a lot of times it may not be the principal, because principals are busy. It may not be the assistant principal, because again, they're busy. But whoever that person is that's tasked with attendance should want to connect all the stakeholders. Mm-hmm. And lastly, empower the entire school community. Everyone should be concerned if students are missing school. You can be the custodian. We have our custodian. She can translate if we have families come in, like our Spanish speaking families that come in, and she will talk to them about attendance, about how it's important to bring your kid to school. And if you can't bring them to school, to call us and let us know, right? Mm-hmm. That only works if everybody in the school knows what's going on around attendance. But when you empower others to talk about attendance, you take the pressure off of the attendance team. You take the pressure off of the teachers, because everybody's involved. So it's not just a one person job.
Right.
So that's the framework that I try to share. It's super simple. It's kind of like a rinse and repeat, but it works.
With that being said, when we talk about strategy and we talk about attendance, when you notice that the kids are not showing up, then what are some of the things that's important to put in place? Sometimes we know phone numbers are not up to date. Mm-hmm. Emails may be missing a letter or a number. So what are some other things that we can do to get the attention of the parent or caregiver that may be caring for the child?
Well, I believe you have to use multiple channels of communication. Phone, text, Class Dojo. We use Class Dojo. Social media is a great place to connect families. The schools have an active social media, which they should, because we're in that age, right, where you need active social media, because I may not be checking my phone, or I may not have the Class Dojo app, which parents aren't required to have that stuff on their phone, but they may have Instagram. Right. They may have Facebook, right? They may have a friend that say, hey, did you see the school had on their Instagram page? Whatever. Mm-hmm. But I always say multiple channels of communication: phone, email, text, Class Dojo, social media, home visits when applicable, and also like showing up at those community events, right? Parents may not come to the event at the school, but if you have a community organizer that's giving an event and people are going to show up, then I think it's important for schools to make sure that somebody's present, mm-hmm. right? because then I'm there, I'm in your environment, I'm becoming more familiar. You see that I'm invested. So the next time you send me a text, I may look at it
Right.
because I just saw you at the community event.
Yeah.
So we have to be open minded. And also, a lot of times with calls, because I know a lot of teachers say, well, oh, I called and they didn't answer. Again, we're making assumptions. I have some parents, and I'm pretty sure you've had some parents too, where certain jobs, you're not allowed to answer your phone. You're not allowed to have your phone.
Yeah.
So it's not that the parent is ignoring your call. They might not be able to take the call, you know? So in that situation, even if you're sending the calls and the calls are all you can do, make the call, leave the message, document the call, make your attempts, but then also know, okay, once I hit this wall, who do I go to? I think that's important too, because some teachers will get frustrated and just be like, okay, whatever. I've tried to call 3 times, nobody's answering the phone, I'm done. Okay, try to call 3 times, document all 3 of those times, and then move it up the chain, however your school operates, to the other person. But at least you tried your due diligence. Snail mail is also an option.
Bringing back the letter.
I know, like people don't necessarily like to mail things, but snail mail is also an option. What we should not be relying heavily on is students taking that information home, because they're students, they're kids. Some of that stuff don't even make it out the building, or you may see it on the sidewalk. So we're really like entrusting 12 and 13-year-olds to be our line of communication. And that's not fair to them nor families. And it's just not going to be productive.
That's right. That's true. And I'm so happy that you brought up showing up for community events, because when it comes to awareness, right, and visibility, I think those are the most powerful tools, the most powerful move that you could make, because it's hard for me to associate you with something that's important if I've never seen you before, if I've never interacted with you before. So me coming across you in this different environment then shows me that you are not just a supporter, but you're also advocating for the students that you serve and the community that you serve.
Absolutely. You become real, because a lot of times when we sit up in the school building, like when kids see you out in the world, it's like, oh, you grocery shop. Like, yes, I grocery shop, I go to the mall. But, it like I said, it makes you're more of a human, you're more of a real person. You're not just the lady at the school.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's funny that you bring those up, because I think about the kids. I see them in the streets.
They're shocked. Like, what?
Right, it's a whole thing to the system. You do shush. No, you don't. Yeah, I'm a whole human being. I got a whole life outside of this place. Come on now.
But like I said, it makes you think about it. They only see us there. So that's the only association that they have, really.
Right. Which is true, which is very, very true. So my question for you, I believe this is close to my last question for you. So for schools that have after school programs, right? Whether there's something that they're building on their own, or they have brought in another agency, nonprofit, community agency, whichever the case may be, to take care of that portion of the day, how can they work together when it comes to attendance goals on both sides, but also meeting the needs of the students?
Yeah, so I think after school programs can be a very powerful partner, right? That just extends the learning, the belonging, the motivation for students. It's just basically an extension when students go to an after school program that's in line with the same kind of mission and value that the schools have, right? It's kind of like a bridge, I would say. I would say for after school providers to have some type of attendance goal, that's something that they can coordinate. They can have some type of attendance goal or align their attendance goal with what the school has. Share data, share the data that you're getting from your program with whoever point person is at the school. And I'll back up a minute. Know who your point person is at the school so you can make some type of impact, right? And also, like, the after school program could reinforce the communication with families, you know, reach out. Hey, I'm an extension of the school. I'm the after school program. These are some of the things that we're doing. And like I said, making sure that it kind of lines up with some of the same language that the school is speaking, right? And you only get that information if you make sure you have your point person and person that you can talk to do that. And I think that will improve the attendance to the program, and it'll also improve attendance at the school because they know that you're working together. Like you said earlier, I've seen students not come to school and try to come after school to go on the trip with the program, and it's like, no, you did not come to school today. You're not going on the trip. And then the flip side, they may all show up one day because they know they're taking a trip with after school program. And that's fine too, by any means.
That's Ruby's door.
Yes, by any means. But like I said, I do believe, and I have seen it in many, many instances where like after school programs can be very powerful partners to schools.
Most definitely. For all my administrators and after school programs, I always suggest or stress to them when it's the beginning of the year, make a priority meeting with your principal, with the person that you're supposed to be in contact with, so you could address and go over what your goals are, so you could see where you could collaborate. Going back to that point that you made about being visible. If you're not visible in these places, how can people know what the expectations are, but also how can they see you and what services that you offer? But it's also an opportunity to collaborate for community events at the same time, because the same way school have to put on parent engagement functions and all those other things, so do after school programs. So if it's an opportunity for us to come together and put a function together for the kids, and with the incentive of stressing the importance of attendance and why they need to show up, then why not work together to get that message across?
Absolutely. I would even go further to like that being a goal throughout the year. How many events can we collaborate on? Because some of these after school programs, listen, they have funding.
Yes.
They have access to things that schools might not have. Sometimes they're willing to pay for trips, all types of things, all for student success. So I would say, yeah, definitely go in, and not only can we collaborate, but how many activities can we collaborate on throughout the school year?
Exactly. So that brings us close to the end of our show, y'all. But before we wrap up, let's go ahead and jump into our Professionals Lounge. Professionals Lounge is a segment of the show that allows guests to share advice with other practitioners in the OST and youth development field about how they can begin growing their gifts and talents, but also develop themselves as professionals in the field. Here's our Professionals Lounge conversation. All right, everyone, we have arrived at the end of our show in our Professionals Lounge. And for Professionals Lounge, Johnetta, my question for you is what advice would you give people or professionals in this field that want to continue their career, not just in education, but they're also dabbling with the idea of being a consultant in education to some degree? What advice would you give them?
I would say start by becoming an expert in your field, right? Your niche, right? I had a lot of experience in education. I've worked in a lot of different areas, like being a special ed teacher, being an ELA teacher, instructional coach. But when I started my consultancy, I really wanted to narrow down my topic. What am I the most passionate about? And what do I have the most information about? Because a lot of educators, like, we're walking around with a vast amount of knowledge about a lot of things. And sometimes it's hard, but I would say first start by becoming an expert in your field. Also, there's a big difference between being an educator and being a business owner. So you have to allow yourself to be vulnerable and open to learning. You may even need a coach. I invested in coaching, and It's something that I will continue to invest in for right now because my business is young. I'm young in my business. So we know a lot, but you might not know the business side of being a consultant. So I would definitely say, invest in some type of coaching. And if not coaching, invest in a network of people who are knowledgeable, right? You definitely have to learn how to build trust with people, your community, your potential clients. You have to learn strategies and ways to build trust because a lot of times, it's difficult for people to connect with you if they don't know you or have that history with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And have your systems and strategies and frameworks together,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just like I spoke about my framework earlier, that is a framework that I've tried and that I have gotten results from. So that's something that I always go back to. But I have systems. I have a lot of systems. I'm a systems girl. So, I have a lot of systems. I have a lot of structures, a lot of things a lot of strategies that work. So you need to make sure that your strategies are in line with your passion and that the strategies actually work,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think if you can combine your passion with your strategy, then you could make an impact.
True. I support it. I definitely support it. Well, everyone, thank you for being here and being part of the show. Johnetta, if anyone wanted to get in touch with you to find out what your services are, to help them with their process of attendance, to get more feedback or coaching when it comes to school culture enrichment and attendance strategy, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, I am on Instagram at more.learning, where I share tips, strategies to empower school leaders and teachers to combat chronic absenteeism. I'm on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, I share some of the same information, but I also share information about mindset, leadership, like leadership growth on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking to possibly in the near future get on YouTube, but I'm not quite there yet. But like Instagram, LinkedIn, all my information is in my bio. I have my link in my bio. It has free resources like a teacher buy-in checklist. I have communication templates that are available for download. So it's really just like a plug and play when you're trying to communicate with families. So again, right now I have a lot of free resources that are available. Instagram, LinkedIn. Also, I have a pretty decent sized email community list that I, send them some separate stuff. They may get information first and be able to check out the strategies and those types of things. So, but, like I say, in the future, I'm looking to do YouTube, possibly have a virtual conference coming up soon.
Nice.
So that's in the works. So yeah, I'm here. I'm available to support if it's just a discovery call. I do free discovery calls just to kind of sit down and talk about what type of services that you may need, what type of services align to you. I I do professional development ongoing, in person and virtual. That's something that I enjoy.
Nice.
So yeah, pretty much anything right now, any way that I can assist and help, I'm open to it.
Well, everyone, that brings us to the end of our show. If you liked what you heard and you enjoyed our conversation, make sure that you're following us on YouTube, but also hit that like button so we know what you are enjoying. You can also find us on other podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts if you want to listen to our audio version as well. To get more behind the scenes stuff, make sure that you're following us on our social media accounts, Instagram and Facebook at School After Hours. Well, that's all I have for today. In the words of Mr. Arthur Ashe, start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. Until next time, y'all. Bye-bye.